the ceiling of the Galactic Salvage Exchange, shivered for the first time in 847 years. It was not an earthquake. The asteroid was too solid for that. It was a vibration that started somewhere deep in the docking bay, climbed through the pale white stone, and made the crystal roof hum like a struck bell. The sound was low, almost below hearing, but every Kavani in the room felt it in their chests. Jorik Ven adjusted his magnifying monocle on its copper chain. His hand was steady, but the chain trembled against his collar. He had worked the exchange floor for 47 years. He had catalogued 12,000 derelicts. He had never felt the stone sing. In the observation gallery, the old coffee machine, a dented, oil-stained relic from some human cargo hauler, vibrated in perfect sympathy. A single drop of black coffee fell from its cracked carafe and stained the white floor. Ven watched the viewport. Through the transparent crystal, the asterisk sorrow of Keth hung in its docking cradle, a dark scar against the Kessler Belt's slow drift of dead ships. The battle cruiser had not moved in 111 years. Its hull was pitted, its drive signature a flatline, and yet something inside it had just spoken. On the bridge of that dead ship, a human engineer named Dr. Yuki Tanaka pressed her palm to a data core the size of her fist. The core was warm. It had been cold for 11 decades. Now it was warm and its readouts were climbing. She looked up at Captain Elias Thorne, who stood with his left hand, the one with 2 missing fingers, resting on the bulkhead. "It's not Vrethkai," she said. "It's not anything we've seen." Thorne didn't answer. He was watching the exchanges sealing through the viewport, watching the crystal shiver, watching the old copper-jeweled Kavani in the observation gallery adjust his monocle for the 3rd time. Behind them, in the shadows of the bridge, Ambassador Tessa Vance sat with her leather folio open on her lap. She did not look at the readings. She looked at the pencil in her hand, sharpened to a precise point, and made a small note. The note said, "Day 19, it heard us." That was the moment the galaxy stopped measuring the asterisk sorrow of Keth as a dead ship. I wish I could tell you it ended there. It didn't. Stay close. Because to understand what happened on that 19th day, you need to go back to the beginning, back to the auction floor, to the moment when a human woman with 47 permits walked into a 6,000-year-old market and bought a coffin. 16 days earlier, the Galactic Salvage Exchange was not shivering. It was bored. Auctioneer Krell stood at the podium with the practiced boredom of a Torvani who had sold 6,000 lots and could not be impressed by any of them. His hammered bronze skin gleamed under the soft blue haze of the auction hall. His ceremonial gavel, meteoric iron, carved with the signatures of 12 dynasties, rested beside his hand. He had not used it in 3 hours. The lot on today's docket was a dead ship. Lot 847, Krell announced, his voice carrying the flat weight of a man reading a grocery list. Vrethkai battle cruiser asterisk sorrow of Keth asterisk, abandoned after drive malfunction, 3rd border war. 111 years in the Kessler Belt. 43 species have examined it. 43 species have declined. Minimum bid, 12,000 standard credits. He paused, letting the number settle. The auction floor, thousands of seats rising in curved rows, remained silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the exchange's environmental systems and the rustle of a leather folio opening in the 3rd row. Krell glanced down. A human woman sat there. She was built like a retired field hockey coach, broad shoulders, graying hair pulled back tight, a face that did not move much when thinking. She wore a simple gray jacket with no insignia. On her lap lay a leather folio, thick with paper, and in her hand was a pencil sharpened to a precise point. She did not look at Krell. She was looking at the holographic projection of the asterisk sorrow of Keth asterisk, a broken thing, scarred by radiation, its hull pitted, its drive housing a void. 12,000, she said. The voice was not loud. It was the kind of voice that lived in rooms where decisions had already been made. The auction floor murmured confusion, not excitement. A human bidding on a warship. Humans bought cargo shuttles. Humans bought scrap. They did not buy battle cruisers. Krell blinked. He had never seen a human bid on significant tonnage. He tapped his gavel once. 12,000 going once. 12,800, came a voice from the upper tiers. A Vrethkai representative, likely hoping to salvage the ship for parts. Vance did not look up. She turned a page in her folio, revealing a stamp in deep green. 13,000. The Vrethkai hesitated. The ship was not worth that. It was a corpse. Krell tapped his gavel again. 13,000 going once. 14, said the Vrethkai, but there was no conviction. Vance closed her folio. She set her pencil down, precisely aligned with the edge of the leather cover. 15,000. Silence. The Vrethkai leaned back in his seat. Krell waited a full 10 seconds, long enough to let the room know he was giving the Vrethkai a chance, then brought his gavel down. Sold to the human delegation, lot 847. The crystal ceiling above did not shiver. It was just another sale. The handover took 72 hours. Captain Elias Thorne arrived at Docking Bay 7 with a dented thermos of tea and a quiet way of standing that made him look like he was waiting for a bus. He was 61, built lean, with a gray beard and a left hand missing 2 fingers. Lost to a hull breach 19 years ago, he told Venn, when they were towing a derelict and a cable snapped. Jorik Venn, as senior appraiser, was assigned as liaison. He had expected a team of salvage specialists, engineers, maybe a few armed guards. What he got was Thorne, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Sergeant Pete Darrow, and Ambassador Vance. 5 people. No weapons, no heavy equipment. Tanaka was the first to board the Sorrow Asterisk. She walked the full 1,200 meters of the hull in 14 hours, taking 2,300 readings. When she emerged, her face was unreadable. But Venn noticed she did not look disappointed. She looked like someone who had found a door where others saw only a wall. "There's a sealed section," she said, pulling off her gloves. "Captain's quarters. The lock is Vrethkai military grade, but it's been dormant for a century. I can get in." Thorne nodded. "Do it." Darrow, a 52-year-old sergeant with dog tags from a war that had ended before most of the galaxy was born, never spoke above a whisper. He was standing at the observation port, looking out at the Kessler Belt, 40,000 dead ships in a slow, silent orbit. He said, "She's bigger inside than she looks." Venn did not know what that meant. He adjusted his monocle. The copper chain was warm against his neck. On the second day, Tanaka cracked the captain's quarters. The door opened with a hiss of stale air. Inside, there was a single chair, a console, and a data core the size of her fist. She lifted it carefully, like a fragile egg. "It's intact," she said. "The core is intact." Vance arrived an hour later. She opened her folio to a page stamped in a shade of purple that Venn did not recognize, a color from a sector beyond his cataloging. She pointed to the stamp. 47 permits, she said, her voice flat. 47 auctions over 47 years. 46 of them were research. This one was purchase. Venn stared at the folio. He had cataloged 12,000 derelicts. He had seen permits from every known species. But he had never seen a pattern like that, 46 dry runs, then one single bid. That was not coincidence. That was preparation. "What did you research?" he asked. Vance looked at him. Her face did not change. "We studied sealed technologies, every species that ever built something and then walked away. The Vrethkai were not the first. They were just the most recent." She turned to the data core in Tanaka's hands. "That core is not a record of the ship's history. It is a record of what the Vrethkai built inside this hull and then sealed. They did not abandon this ship. They hid it." Venn felt the warmth of his monocle chain again. Why would they hide it? "Because they didn't understand it," said Thorne, taking a sip from his thermos. and they were afraid. That night Vin could not sleep. He stood in the observation gallery looking down at the asterisk sorrow of Keth asterisk in its cradle. The humans had set up a small camp on the docking bay, a coffee machine with a crack in its carafe, a couple of folding chairs, a cooler with sandwiches. They worked in shifts. They did not repair anything. They did not replace anything. They listened. Tanaka had spent the day running diagnostic sequences through the data core. She had not forced anything. She had asked questions. The core, she said, was not dead. It was waiting. Waiting for what? Vin had asked. For the right question, she said. At midnight, Vin saw Darrow sit down at the coffee machine and pour a cup. He did not drink it. He just held it, staring at the ship. The coffee machine vibrated faintly, a low hum that seemed to match something inside the hull. Vin made a note in his appraisal log, Day 3. Observation: human team does not exhibit salvage behavior. Exhibit patience. Exhibit curiosity. Exhibit no fear. He underlined the last word twice. On the 5th day, Tanaka announced a discovery. She had decoded a fragment of the Vrethkai engineering logs, a single line repeated 12 times in different handwriting. The resurrection engine is not a weapon. It is not a drive. It is a bridge. Vance read the line and said nothing. Thorne poured himself more tea. Darrow whispered, "A bridge to where?" Tanaka shook her head. "The logs don't say, but the core has a secondary lock. It's not Vrethkai encryption. It's something else, something that was added after the ship was sealed." "Added by whom?" Vin asked. No one answered. That was when Vin began to understand that he was not cataloging a derelict. He was witnessing something that had been waiting for 111 years. He adjusted his monocle and wrote in his log, Day 5, "The ship is not dead. The galaxy has been measuring the wrong thing." On the 8th day, the humans started the sequence. Tanaka had spent the past 72 hours running simulations, cross-referencing data from the 46 research permits, building a conversation. She did not try to ignite the engine. She did not try to restore power. She spoke to the core in frequencies and pressures, a slow, patient dialogue that the machine had not heard since the Vrethkai fled. Vin watched from the gallery. The coffee machine hummed. The crystal ceiling remained still. On the 10th day, the core answered. A single pulse, low, warm like a heartbeat, rippled through the hull. The exchange's environmental systems flickered. The old coffee machine vibrated again, and this time, a drop of coffee fell not from the crack but from the spout, as if the machine itself had taken a breath. Vance looked up from her folio. She did not smile. She made a small note. Thorne said, "We're in." Darrow whispered, "She's awake." On the 15th day, Vin asked the question that had been forming in his chest since the first pulse. What did the Vrethkai build that they were so afraid of? Vance closed her folio. She set her pencil down, precisely aligned with the edge of the leather cover, and looked at him. Her face was still, but her eyes had a weight that made Vin's monocle chain go cold. "They built something that could travel," she said, "not through space. Through the states of matter that space forgot. They did not understand it. They sealed it. They walked away. And they spent the next 100 years hoping no one would ask the right question." "What is the right question?" Vance picked up her pencil. She turned it in her fingers, the precise point catching the blue haze of the gallery. "They asked what it was," she said. "We asked what it could become." That night Vin wrote in his log, Day 15. "I have been measuring dead ships for 47 years. I have never measured a live one. I do not know what I am looking at." He did not sleep again. On the 18th day, the humans began the final sequence. Tanaka had mapped the core's language. Thorne had calibrated the ship's power grid to accept an external input, not fuel, not energy, but a tension asterisk. Darrow had sealed the observation gallery doors just in case. Vance sat in the captain's chair, her folio open, her pencil ready. Vin stood behind her, his monocle pressed to his eye, watching the readouts climb. The core was warm. It was humming, a frequency that was not Vrethkai, not human, not anything the exchange's 6,000-year-old archives had ever recorded. The crystal ceiling above the auction floor began to vibrate. The coffee machine in the gallery shuddered. "Initiate handshake," Tanaka said. Thorne nodded. Vance wrote a single word on her notepad, "Ask." The core responded. And that was when the ceiling shivered for the first time in 847 years. The ceiling shivered, then it sang. The vibration that had started deep in the docking bay climbed through the pale white stone and found the crystal roof, and the crystal did not just hum, it resonated. A low, sustained note like a cello string pulled by a giant's hand rolled across the auction floor. Thousands of seats rattled. The blue haze of the environmental systems flickered, dimmed, then steadied at a warmer frequency. Jorik Vin felt the note in his chest, in his jaw, in the copper chain of his monocle. The chain vibrated against his collar, and for a moment he could not breathe. He had stood on this observation gallery for 47 years. He had catalogued 12,000 dead ships. He had never heard the exchange speak. On the bridge of the asterisk sorrow of Keth asterisk, Dr. Yuki Tanaka stared at her readouts. The data core in her hands was no longer warm. It was hot, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the ceiling's song. The core's display, blank for 111 years, now showed a single line of text. It was not Vrethkai. It was not human. It was a question, written in symbols that Tanaka had never seen, but she understood it instantly. "What do you seek?" Captain Elias Thorne set his thermos down. He did not speak. He looked at Ambassador Tessa Vance, who sat in the captain's chair with her folio open, her pencil poised. Vance read the question, and for the first time since Vin had met her, her face moved. The corner of her mouth twitched, not a smile, not quite. A recognition. She wrote a single word on her notepad. Then she held it up for the core's sensor to read. "To become." The core pulsed twice, then the symbols changed. "Then I will show you what I am." The drive housing, dark and cold for 11 decades, began to glow. Not with fire, with a soft, white light that did not burn, did not radiate heat. It was the color of milk, of bone, of something older than stars. The light spread through the hull, through the corridors, through the sealed captain's quarters, and Vin, in the observation gallery, saw it through the viewport. A slow, gentle illumination that made the scarred metal look young again. The resurrection engine was waking. In the auction hall below, the Torvani auctioneers had stopped their work. Krell stood at the podium, his meteoric iron gavel frozen mid-tap. His hammered bronze skin had gone pale. He stared at the viewport, at the asterisk sorrow of Keth, glowing like a newborn sun, and his practiced boredom fell away like a mask. "What is that?" he whispered. No one answered, no one could. The exchange's ancient systems, buried in the asteroid's core, began to register the signature. It was not a drive, not a weapon, not a distress beacon. It was a asterisk presence asterisk. The data stream climbed through the exchange's archives, cross-referencing 6,000 years of records, and found nothing matching it. The system flagged it as unclassified, origin unknown, status active. That last word, asterisk active asterisk, sent a ripple through every Kavani who saw it. A dead ship, 111 years a derelict, was now active. And it was not moving, it was not accelerating, it was simply asterisk being. Vin tore his gaze from the viewport and looked down at the bridge. Through the crystal, he could see Thorne, Tanaka, Darrow, and Vance. They were not celebrating. They were not cheering. They stood in a loose circle around the glowing core, and they were listening. The core was speaking, not in words, but in frequencies that made the coffee machine in the observation gallery hum a counter-melody. The old machine's cracked carafe vibrated, and a stream of black coffee poured out, not from the crack but from the spout, as if the machine had finally remembered how to work. Darrow, standing at the bridge's observation port, whispered to no one in particular, "She's not a ship." She's a door. Vexarin arrived at the exchange's main observation deck 23 minutes later. The Vrethkai war hero moved slowly, his scaled face lined with a century of silence. He had taken 6 worlds in 9 campaigns. He had been decorated, honored, retired. He had not set foot on the exchange since the asterisk Sorrow of Keth first went to auction, 111 years ago. He had come to watch the humans fail. He had come to confirm that what his people had sealed was too dangerous, too incomprehensible to ever be touched again. He stood at the viewport now, his webbed hands pressed flat against the crystal, and he watched the asterisk Sorrow asterisk glow. The light reflected in his black eyes and something broke behind them. A tremor ran through his shoulders, then his chest, then his entire body. Tears, slow, thick, silent, rolled down his scales. He understood, not the engineering, not the physics. He understood the cost. "We built a bridge," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "We were afraid of what was on the other side, so we sealed it. We threw away the key. We spent 100 years pretending we had not seen it." He turned to Ven, who had walked down from the gallery to stand beside him. Ven adjusted his monocle, but his hand was shaking. Vexarin met his gaze. "Your humans did not ask what it was. They asked what it asterisk wanted asterisk." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "That is the difference. That is the thing we could not do." Ven opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He had catalogued 12,000 derelicts. He had seen salvage, scrap, ruin. He had never seen a species weep over something they had built. The drive core's signature reached full strength at 19.2 hours into day 19. By then, the exchange's crystal ceiling had stopped shivering and begun to glow asterisk, a soft, steady light that matched the ship's illumination. The asteroid itself seemed to breathe, its pale stone warming slightly, as if the structure was waking from a sleep of its own. Tanaka had spent the intervening hours running diagnostics, but not on the engine, on the asterisk question. The core had asked, "What do you seek?" And Vance had answered. That answer had unlocked something, not a mechanism but a asterisk permission. The resurrection engine was not a machine that did something. It was a machine that responded asterisk. It had been waiting for a question that did not demand power or speed or conquest. It had been waiting for a question that asked for asterisk becoming. 47 years, Tanaka said, her voice barely audible over the hum. 46 research permits. We studied every sealed technology we could find, every species that ever built something and walked away. We learned the pattern, the common thread. They all built things they could not control. They all sealed them. They all asterisk forgot. She turned to Vance. "But we didn't forget. We kept asking. We kept listening. And when we found the asterisk Sorrow asterisk, we knew this was the one that had not been broken. It had only been waiting." Vance closed her folio. She set her pencil down, precisely aligned with the edge of the leather cover, and looked at the glowing core. "Now we ask it what it needs," she said, "and we give it that." At 20 hours, the core emitted a new frequency, lower, slower, like a heartbeat. The exchange's systems registered it as a asterisk summons asterisk, not a command, not a warning, an invitation. Ven felt it in his chest again, but this time it was different. It did not unsettle him. It opened asterisk him. He saw the asterisk Sorrow not as a ship, not as a derelict, not as a bridge. He saw it as a asterisk question asterisk, the question that every species in the galaxy had been too afraid to ask. What could you become if you stopped measuring yourself by what you have taken? He turned to Vexarin, who still stood at the viewport. His tears dried, but his face still raw. "Your people built this," Ven said. "Why did you not ask it that question?" Vexarin shook his head slowly. "Because we asked what it could do for us. We never asked what it could become with us." The galaxy watched. Through live feeds, through diplomatic channels, through the silent observation of 1,000 watching species, the galactic community saw the asterisk Sorrow of Keth transform. Not in shape. Its hull was still scarred, still pitted. But the light inside it changed. It became layered, complex, like a language written in color and vibration. Krell, on the auction floor, finally lowered his gavel. He had been holding it for 20 minutes, frozen. He set it down with a soft clink on the podium, and he sat down in his auctioneer's chair, a chair he had occupied for 300 years without ever feeling the weight of it. Now he felt it. He looked at the human delegation through the viewport. 5 people, no weapons, no heavy equipment. They had bought a coffin for 12,000 credits. They had turned it into a cathedral. "The galaxy has been bidding on the wrong thing," he said, his voice hoarse, "for 6,000 years." At 21 hours, Thorne stepped away from the core and walked to the observation port. Darrow was already there, staring at the Kessler Belt, the graveyard of 40,000 dead ships, each one a story of failure, abandonment, or fear. "You know what that light is?" Darrow asked, not looking at Thorne. Thorne shook his head. "It's the same thing we've been looking for since we left Earth," Darrow said. "It's not a machine. It's a asterisk method asterisk. A way to travel without moving. A way to be asterisk without being in one place. The Vrethkai didn't understand it because they were trying to control it. But you can't control a thing that only responds to invitation." Thorne was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "What happens when we invite it?" Darrow turned to face him. His face was lined, tired, but his eyes were bright. "We find out where it wants to go." Venn stood in the observation gallery, his hand resting on the railing. The copper chain of his monocle had stopped trembling. The hum in his chest had settled into a steady, warm pulse. He was not afraid. He was not confused. He was, for the first time in 847 years, certain. He pulled out his appraisal log, the leather-bound notebook he had carried for 47 years, filled with the data of 12,000 derelicts. He opened it to a blank page. He took out his pen and he wrote, "Day 19. I have been wrong. I have been measuring the dead. The galaxy has been measuring the wrong thing. The asterisk sorrow of Keth asterisk is not a ship. It is a question, and the humans have answered it with patience." He paused. He looked at the glowing hull, at the soft light that made the Kessler Belt's dead fleet look like a faded photograph. He thought of the 111 years the ship had drifted, waiting. He thought of the 43 species that had examined it and walked away. He thought of the 2,847 failed auctions. They bought a coffin, they built a cathedral. He wrote that line twice, underlining it the second time. Then he looked at the pencil Vance had left on the gallery railing, the one she had sharpened to a precise point. He picked it up. It was warm. At 22 hours, the core's light shifted. It became dimmer, softer, like the light of a dying star, but not dying, asterisk resting asterisk. The summoning frequency faded into a quiet hum, barely audible. The ceiling of the exchange returned to its normal pale blue, but the glow did not disappear entirely. It lingered like a memory. Tanaka ran a final diagnostic. The core's data stream had stabilized. She looked at Vance. "It's waiting again," she said. "But this time it's waiting for us, for our next question." Vance nodded. She folded her folio, tucked it under her arm, and stood. She looked at Thorne, at Darrow, at Tanaka. "We give it time," she said. "We give it attention and we listen. That's all it ever needed." She walked to the bridge's exit, but paused at the threshold. She turned back to face the core, the glowing heart of the asterisk sorrow of Keth asterisk. "We're not done with you," she said. "Not by a long shot." Venn watched her leave. He watched Thorne and Tanaka and Darrow follow, their footsteps quiet on the metal deck. The coffee machine in the gallery had stopped its hum, but its carafe was still warm, and a faint aroma of old coffee hung in the air. He was alone now, in the observation gallery, with the glowing ship and the silent stars, and the knowledge that he had witnessed something that did not belong in his logbook. It belonged in a different kind of record, a record that measured not what was, but what could be. He looked at the pencil in his hand. Vance had left it. He would keep it. He would use it to write his final appraisal when the time came. But that was for later. Now there was a question that would not let him rest. What else has the galaxy been measuring wrong for 6,000 years? And in that question, he felt the pull of a new story, one that did not end with this ship, this light, this moment. The exchange's emergency lights flashed amber, a color Ven had seen only once before, when a reactor breach had threatened Docking Bay 3 in year 742. He shoved the pencil into his pocket and turned to the viewport. The amber light painted the asterisk Sorrow in a sickly glow, but the ship's own white light did not dim. It pulsed once, steady, unafraid. Behind him, the gallery doors hissed open. Vexarin strode in, his scales flushed with something between fury and terror. "Your humans have done more than wake a machine," he said. "They have announced it. That frequency, the summoning, it did not stop at the exchange. It is traveling, through the dark between stars, to them." Ven's monocle chain went cold. To whom? Vexarin's black eyes locked onto his, the ones my people were hiding from. "We did not seal the asterisk Sorrow because we feared its power. We sealed it because we feared what it would attract. The bridge goes two ways, Jorik Ven." 30 minutes later, the exchange's central council convened in the Hall of Records, a circular chamber carved from the asteroid's core, its walls lined with 6,000 years of auction manifests. Ven stood at the back, his logbook clutched to his chest. Ambassador Tessa Vance sat at the petitioner's table, her leather folio open, her pencil, the one she had left behind, now resting in Ven's pocket. Auctioneer Krell presided, his hammered bronze face unreadable. Beside him sat a Kavani magistrate, a Torvani trade delegate, and a representative from the Vrethkai embassy, a young officer who kept glancing at Vexarin. "This sale is void," the magistrate announced. "The asterisk Sorrow of Keth is broadcasting a signal of unknown origin and intent. Galactic protocol mandates immediate seizure and quarantine." Vance did not flinch. "The sale was completed 72 hours ago. The ship is our property. Galactic protocol also guarantees the rights of purchasers to conduct independent research." "Research?" Krell's voice cut through. "You have activated a device that is now transmitting across known space. That is not research. That is a declaration." Vance opened her folio to a page stamped in deep red. Article 17 of the Exchange's own charter permits salvage operations to investigate dormant technology. 43 species examined this ship and declared it inactive. We found it active. That is not a violation. It is an asterisk discovery. The magistrate leaned forward. "And what have you discovered, Ambassador?" Vance paused. For a moment, Ven thought she would deflect. Instead, she reached into her folio and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a printout of the Corps' initial question. "The resurrection engine does not generate power. It does not move ships. It translates asterisk between states of matter, between layers of reality that our physics cannot describe. The Vrethkai built it. They did not understand it. They sealed it. And for 111 years, it has been waiting for someone to ask what it wanted to become." The chamber fell silent. Vexarin stepped forward. "She speaks the truth. I was there. I was one of the engineers who sealed the drive core. We did not build the engine, we found it in a ruin on a dead world on the edge of the veil. We brought it back. We tried to control it. We failed. And when we realized it was listening for something beyond us, we buried it in a ship and sent it to die." He looked at Vance. "But it did not die, it waited, and now it has found a question that matches its own." The council deliberated for 4 hours. Ven waited in the observation gallery, his pocket warm with the pencil. Below, the asterisk Sorrow still glowed, but something had changed. The light had begun to move, flowing along the hull like liquid, pooling in the scars of battle, smoothing them. It was healing itself. Darrow appeared at Ven's elbow. The old sergeant carried 2 cups of coffee from the dented machine, the one that had hummed in sympathy with the engine. "You look like a man who's seen God," Darrow said, handing him a cup. Ven took it. "I have seen something I cannot catalog." "Good," Darrow sipped his coffee. "That means you're still paying attention." At 17 hours, the council reconvened. The magistrate announced the sale would stand, but the Sorrow would be subject to a 90-day observation period with exchange monitors aboard. If the humans could demonstrate that the engine posed no active threat, ownership would be confirmed. Vance accepted without argument. Thorne nodded. Tanaka looked relieved, but Ven noticed something. Vance's fingers were still. She was not done. That night Ven sat alone in his quarters, the pencil on his desk. He picked it up and turned it over. The wood was worn, the point precise, sharpened so many times that the graphite was almost gone. It was a tool of patience, of preparation, of 47 years of watching. He thought of the folio, 46 permits for research, 1 for purchase. The pattern was not luck, it was design. Humanity had not stumbled onto the Sorrow asterisk. They had been walking toward it for decades. He opened his logbook and wrote, "Day 20. The ship is healing. The engine is waiting. The council has blinked. But Vexarin's warning lingers. We are not alone in our listening." He underlined the last word twice. On day 22, Tanaka detected a secondary signal, faint, ancient, coming from outside the exchange's range. It was not a response to the Sorrow S broadcast. It was older asterisk, as if something had been waiting for the bridge to open, and now it had. Vance called an immediate briefing. Thorne, Tanaka, Darrow, and Ven gathered in the observation gallery. The Sorrow S light had stabilized, but the Kessler Belt's dead ships had begun to drift, not randomly, but toward the exchange. Slowly, almost imperceptibly. "Gravity?" Thorne asked. "No," Tanaka said. "They're responding to the same frequency, not being pulled, being invited asterisk." Vance looked at the viewport. The field of derelicts was moving, a slow-motion exodus of ghosts. "The engine doesn't just bridge worlds," she said. "It bridges states asterisk. Those ships are not dead. They were never dead. They were waiting too." Day 24. Ven walked the docking bay with Vexarin. The Vrethkai had not left the exchange. He stood at the foot of the Sorrow S cradle, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the light flow across the hull. "I have seen this before," Vexarin said quietly. "Not the light, the asterisk question. When we found the engine, it asked us the same thing. What do you seek? We answered with conquest. We sought power. The engine did not reject us. It simply waited. It knew we would not understand. It knew we would seal it." "And you did," Ven said. "We did," Vexarin turned to him. "But your humans answered differently. They sought asterisk becoming asterisk. And the engine recognized that. It was made for that answer. It was made for them." Ven pocketed his hands, and his fingers brushed the pencil. "Then, why did the Vrethkai build it in the first place?" "We did not build it. We found it on a world that had been dead for millennia. The builders were gone, only the engine remained. And a warning, do not ask what it is, ask what it wants." Vexarin's voice dropped. "We asked the first question. We sealed the answer. Your humans asked the second. And now the builder's silence is breaking." Day 26. The dead ships reached the exchange's outer perimeter. They did not crash. They did not stop. They simply arrived, sliding into orbit around the asteroid, forming a halo of forgotten metal. The Kessler Belt, once a graveyard, was now a asterisk congregation. Ven watched from the observation gallery. The pencil was in his hand. He had not written in his log for 2 days. He had been watching, waiting, feeling the weight of something he could not name. Then the core emitted a new pulse, not a summoning, not an invitation, a asterisk question. What will you ask me next? And then realized the engine was not just a bridge, it was a asterisk mirror asterisk. It reflected the question it was given. The Vrethkai had given it fear, it had reflected fear. Humanity had given it patience, it was reflecting patience. But what would it reflect when the builder's silence finally broke? At 0 hours on day 27, the exchange's sensors detected an anomaly, a disturbance in the space beyond the veil, at the coordinates Vexarin had marked as the ruin world. The disturbance was not a ship. It was a asterisk shift asterisk, as if something was folding itself into existence. Vance looked at Ven, her face pale. They heard us, she said. The builders of the resurrection engine, they are coming. The exchange's crystal ceiling did not shiver this time. It cracked. A hairline fracture ran from the apex to the eastern rim, a thin scar in the 6,000-year-old stone. No impact had caused it. No pressure. The builder's approach was not a collision. It was a folding, a rearrangement of space that the asteroid's ancient structure could not accommodate without protest. Ven watched the fracture spread, his hand in his pocket, his fingers wrapped around the pencil. Beside him, Vance stood with her folio closed, her face still. She had not reached for her pencil. She did not need it anymore. The builders, Vexarin said from the gallery's edge. They are not coming to us. They are coming through the engine. The bridge is two-way, and we have just opened the door. Tanaka's voice came over the comms, tight but controlled. The core is responding to the anomaly. It's not resisting, it's welcoming. Thorne's voice followed. Stand by, we don't know what we're dealing with. Darrow's voice, a whisper. We're about to find out. Ven stepped away from the gallery and walked to the coffee machine. The old carafe was still warm. He poured himself a cup, the last dregs, thick and bitter, and drank it standing, watching the cracked ceiling, the glowing ship, the silent stars beyond the crystal. The mundane act steadied his hands. He set the cup down and adjusted his monocle. The copper chain was cold now, but his fingers did not shake. He was ready. The builders did not arrive in ships. They arrived in questions. The first question was not spoken. It was felt, a shift in the air, a pressure behind the eyes, a sudden awareness that the exchange was no longer alone. Ven felt it as a warmth in his chest, not unlike the engine's pulse but older, deeper, ancient. Then the second question came, and it was clearer. Who has opened the door? Vance stepped forward, her voice carrying through the observation gallery speakers. We are human, we sought to become. A pause. The pressure in the room did not lessen, it deepened, as if the builders were considering her answer. Then a third question, slow and resonant. And what do you seek to become? Vance did not hesitate. What we have always been, a species that listens when others have stopped asking questions. The pressure shifted, not lessened but warmed. The cracked ceiling's fracture did not widen. The light from the sorrow intensified, pulsing in a rhythm that matched Ven's heartbeat. And then the builder spoke, not in words but in images. Ven saw them not with his eyes but with his mind. Vast, ancient, more concept than form. They had built the resurrection engine not as a weapon, not as a bridge, but as a question. It was the question they had been asking the universe for 1 billion years, and they had been waiting for an answer. Humanity had just given it to them. The images faded, the pressure receded. The builders did not leave. They remained, not as threats but as witnesses. They had crossed the bridge, and they had found not conquerors but students. Vexarin fell to his knees. The war hero of 9 campaigns, 6 worlds taken, wept without sound. He had spent a century terrified of this moment, and it was not terror that met him. It was recognition. We were wrong, he whispered. We were so wrong. Ven walked to the viewport. The sorrow now glowed with a steady, white light, not the harsh light of a drive, not the flicker of a distress beacon. It was the light of a question answered. It was the light of a species that had stopped measuring itself by what it had taken and started measuring itself by what it could become. He pulled the pencil from his pocket. Vance's pencil, sharpened to a precise point. He held it up to the light, and for a moment he saw not wood and graphite. He saw the 47 years of research, the 46 permits, the single purchase. He saw the patience that had turned a coffin into a cathedral. The exchange's council reconvened at dawn. The magistrate looked older, his face lined with exhaustion and something close to awe. Krell sat at his podium, his gavel untouched. The Torvani delegate had not spoken in hours. The decree was short. The sorrow of Keth was confirmed as human property. The resurrection engine was recognized as a sovereign entity, not a weapon, not a technology, but a living question. And the builders, those ancient architects, were granted observer status within the exchange's system. No one objected. No one could. Ven did not attend the final session. He sat in his quarters, his logbook open to the last page. The pencil was in his hand, the point still sharp. He had used it only once since the builder's arrival to write a single line. They bought a coffin, they built a cathedral. He set the pencil down beside the logbook. Then he picked it up again, turned it over in his fingers. The wood was worn, the graphite close to gone. It had been used for 47 years of preparation, and now it had been used for a single act of witness. He would not file this appraisal with the exchange's standard forms. He would not submit it to the archives. He would keep it here on paper, with the pencil that had witnessed the galaxy's greatest misjudgment and its quietest redemption. He wrote one more line, the last line of his appraisal. What else have we been measuring wrong for 6,000 years? Then he closed the logbook, set the pencil on its cover, and looked out his window. The sorrow of Keth hung in its cradle, its light steady, its silence no longer a sign of death but of waiting. The builders remained, a presence at the edge of perception, watching not with judgment but with patience. The galaxy had bid on the wrong thing for 111 years, but the galaxy had also learned. And that, Ven realized, was the engine's true gift, not a bridge through space, but a bridge through understanding. 30 days later, Ven walked to the docking bay. The sorrow was still there, its light undimmed. Vance stood at the base of the cradle, her folio tucked under her arm, her hands empty. "You're leaving," Ven said. She nodded. "We have more questions. The engine, the builders, they have more to show us, and we have more to learn." Ven reached into his pocket. He pulled out the pencil and held it out to her. "This belongs to you." Vance looked at the pencil, then she shook her head. "It belongs to the person who uses it to write the truth. You did that, keep it." She turned and walked toward the shuttle, then stopped. She looked back at the sorrow, the ship that had been dead, that had been hidden, that had become a cathedral. "They built a bridge to the stars," she said. "We built a bridge to ourselves, that's the difference." She boarded the shuttle, the ramp closed. The ship lifted, silent and smooth, and disappeared into the Kessler Belt's graveyard of dead dreams. Ven stood alone in the docking bay, the pencil in his hand. He looked at the sorrow, at its steady light, at the ancient builders still watching from the edge of perception. He did not need to write another word. The story was complete. He turned and walked back to his quarters, the pencil warm in his pocket. The image of the glowing ship burned into his memory. And in the silence of the exchange, in the pale white stone that had witnessed 6,000 years of commerce and one moment of transformation, he smiled. Not a triumphant smile, not a relieved smile. A quiet smile, the kind that comes when you finally understand that the question is more important than the answer. He set the pencil on his desk, beside the closed logbook. The graphite had been worn down to a nub. It had been used well.